We're going to get started. You guys, let us know in the chat. What was your first sales job? We got a ton of people who had paper routes, got jewelry sales, cut code knives, a lot of door-to-door folks. So welcome to PipeGen Live. We're going to talk about displacing competitors and how to eat your competitor's lunch. Before we dig in, I want to thank ZoomInfo. What do you say about ZoomInfo? I mean, one of my favorite tools, obviously, for data, but one of the big things that ZoomInfo is really getting into is, how do we get the entire go-to-market tech stack to work together? So how can we get marketing in the same place, sales in the same place? How can we take all the conversations that we're recording and get some really useful data? They're in the AI game now. So go make sure to check out ZoomInfo. Today, what we're going to talk about, I got some quick stats that I'm going to share on state of sales and specifically competitive landscape. I'm going to introduce our 3 other speakers that we have here today for our panel, and then we're going to do a quick one-on-one. So because a lot of folks are going to ask, yes, the call is being recorded. We'll email it out afterwards. We also want to answer as many questions as possible. So if you guys have questions, drop them into the Q&A section, and we'll get started. This image is a little old, but I always like to show it. The competitive landscape, this was just the marketing tech stack, what you see here on the screen. And you can see this is pulled, I believe, in 2016 or 17. Really competitive then, even more competitive now. And I think there's a couple of stats that, as we start to go through the panel today, that are kind of good to have in the back of your mind. One, the average business reports competing with 25 or more competitors, and that's gone up over time. Software, for really the first time and maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, is feeling a lot more like the rest of the sales world. Everything is a rip and replace. Everyone has something in place that you have to rip and replace versus being a net new solution. There's hardly anything coming out that's new these days. And I think the biggest opportunity is over half of the B2B purchases out there are still categorized as high regret. So in other words, there's a lot of people that are very unsatisfied with their current solution, which gives us an opportunity as sales professionals to start that conversation. So let's get to the content, you guys. I'm going to quickly introduce today's speakers, and then we're going to dig in, you guys. So we have Anthony Iannarino. It's kind of hard to fill in this part, Anthony, in terms of like what you do, because there's so many different things, but the author of some really, really great sales books, one of them being Eat Their Lunch, keynote speaker, runs a huge staffing company, like you're in the game doing sales. So we got Anthony here today. We got Ralph Barsi, VP of Sales at Kahua. We got Ryan Oosterveld, Director of Sales at ZoomInfo. And if you're just coming across our stuff for the first time, my name's Jason Bay. I run a company called Outbound Squad, where we do sales training, coaching, all of that kind of stuff for some of the largest software companies out there. So let's kind of set the stage here. What I want to dig into first, if we kind of think about competitive displacement, I kind of want to approach this in 4 kind of areas. One is, I think we should get aligned on what the proper approach is. And then we can talk about how to gain access into those accounts. And then ultimately in competitive deals, how do we win these? And Anthony, I wanted to kick the first question your way to get started. You have this approach that you've talked about in several of your books and that you've worked with companies on. And it's this idea around, if I want to start conversations and I want to get executives especially interested, like insights and relationships is the way to do that, not talking about our solution. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that and give us some high level perspective on like the approach before we start digging into all the tactics and all that
the
kind of
best
stuff?
way for me to start this is to tell you about 3 calls that I take. If you cold call me, I'm going to take your call. You might not like what I say, but I will still take your call. One guy called me and he says, we've got a brand new CRM and I'd like you to go through a demo with us. And I said, does it say, like, is there a box that says first name? And then is there one that says like last name and phone number and email? I don't need to see a demo. And at the end of this, the guy said, I only get paid if you go through a demo. And I said, you're going to be eating ramen tonight, my friend. That's it. Like, it's not my, I got 3 kids to take care of. I can't take care of you. Another person that called me, I'm only going to give you the second guy. I said, you know what your problem is? And he said, no, what? I said, you don't have a why change. And he said, what's that? And I said, If they don't have a reason to change, they're not going to change. He goes, can I call you back in 10 minutes? I said, okay. He called me back. He figured out the why change. It was perfect. And he said, thanks, that was really helpful. We start at the wrong thing. So what we think is, I have this solution and I have to displace the other person's solution. And the reason that they do this is because in onboarding, you get the gaslighting. We're the best company on earth. We've got the best solution compared to anybody, and we have the best clients. And once they have that and they believe that that's true, that's how they talk. But if you talk to a leader, they don't care about any of this stuff. I would tell you the best thing for you to do is to start with the strategic outcome. So I came out of temporary staffing. I did it for a very, very long time. And I started to notice nobody cares about staffing. They don't want them. I used to tell people, I will give you the very best unreliable people that we can find. And they would laugh because they know that's true. But when I started to say, what do you need to do? Do you need flexibility? Do you need to lower your labor cost? Do you need to be able to hire these people? What are you doing this for? And there's only a few things that people need as a strategic outcome. And it turns out that that's the kind of conversation that they want. They want to talk about what are the outcomes. I don't care about your solution. I don't care about your SaaS product. I want to know, how does this make my business better? And if you don't start there, then you're starting in a place where people are going to just tune out because they don't need to know about features, especially leaders. They don't have any interest in that. They want to know, what are we going to do that's going to make us more money or save us money or something?
Totally. Ryan, I wanted your thoughts. At ZoomInfo, you guys have sort of been going through this journey in the last 2 or 3 years of moving up market and getting into larger businesses and selling larger deals. Where have you guys seen this take place in terms of what Anthony's talking about around like elevating like the conversation and talking about business problems versus we can get data and email addresses and phone numbers? I know this has been a really big thing that you guys have been working on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. I think, in the SMB market, you're doing a lot of educating, thought leadership. They might not have a tool in place yet. They've never gone to market in this way. So you can kind of help guide that buyer a lot more. And you might not be going up against, 15 competitors or an incumbent already. But to your point, Jason, in that mid-market, the enterprise space, it's pretty rare that I ever run into an account that doesn't already have a solution in place that we go head to head against. And to Anthony's point, what I'm not looking to do is say, hey, we're better than XYZ competitor. We can do more and this and that. It's really trying to understand, like, what are the sales and marketing leaders in these types of corporations generally challenged with? Because they're not going to be in our solution day to day. They're looking for things that can help their ICs, help their individual teams as best as possible. So we really do focus on, what is our value proposition to those markets? Where are we different? Having an all-in-one solution, not having your team going in multiple different endpoints to get the data or to use it. You mentioned earlier when you kicked this off from a sponsorship standpoint, but being able to blend those teams together, have better synergies along sales and marketing. I think every company wants that ability. And so really with these larger companies, again, it's not focusing on, oh, you're using this company or this solution. It's, hey, we already know they're using something. Where can we really help drive incremental value to what they're doing, make them more efficient? And again, to Anthony's point, kind of keep it solution and problem driven versus, features and functionality.
Love it. I'd love to hear from everyone in the chat. How many competitors do you typically engage with in your typical deals? So if you're an account executive or sales rep working deals right now, how many competitors will you typically be competing with? Yeah, let us know in the chat.
Yeah, it's like, oh, somebody just said 100.
I'm
But I'm
surprised,
seeing a lot of
honestly. I
threes,
couldn't really
fours.
find a lot of data on this. Like it'd be really interesting to see the number of, the percentage of deals that are competitive. Because every now and then, I have deals where, I've done work with someone in the past and they move to a new organization. There's no competitors in the deal. I'm just competing against them in status quo. So interesting. I think one thing that we can talk about first that's very actionable for the folks on here is CRM and data related to competitive intelligence. So, Ralph, I want to kick this next question your way. I want to talk about you do something really interesting, and I would love for you to give some background on your solution and the space that you're in as well. You guys have a really big internal culture around publishing win rate reports. And every time there's a competitive deal, it's very, here's the person that worked the deal, here's who they were competing against, here's why we won, et cetera. Can you talk about this? Because I think this is one really big for any of the sales leaders here, something really good that they can focus on is those win rate reports from those competitive deals. Can you tell us a little bit more, background on your company and how you guys use this?
Sure. First things first, our company's in the construction management space. So we offer a project management platform for construction owners. And so there's steep competition in every interaction. What Jason is referring to is what we call win reports, and we publish them in an online repository that's, of course, internal. And it basically tells the narrative behind all of our wins, competitive or otherwise. If we're going head to head, for example, with a specific competitor, we're going to tell a narrative about how the conversation started, what problems we diagnosed early in the process, how we prescribed a couple options for the prospect to consider, and how we won the business. We do the same for losses. We don't always win the deals. We have a pretty high win rate, but for those that we do lose, we actually do a post-mortem on those as well by way of a loss report or a loss call. And they're super helpful because you can go back in time and you can capture the patterns of how we were able to displace competitors and how we lost as well, so that we can fine tune and improve our talk tracks when we're engaging new prospects. Super powerful.
Can you share, for those that want to implement something like this, can you give us the details on how does this get operationalized? Is this something that comes up like once a month in, a monthly report? Is it something that comes up in an all hands call? Is it something that is done one-on-one with the reps and then shared via recording? Like, how tactically would someone implement this?
Well, with respect to how we publicize it across the organization, we have a weekly meeting that's held for the entire revenue organization, which includes everyone across the funnel from marketing to customer success. And we will have the rep who just won an opportunity, for example, do an overview of the win report and talk through the story. That way, that person can kind of get hammered with questions internally as to, well, were we asking this question? How tough did it get at this phase of the process, et cetera? Therefore, everybody is learning. But what you're doing when you're doing it on a weekly basis is you're establishing a standard. And so that expectation level starts to increase because everybody's expecting to hear what the story was and how we engaged and ultimately won a prospect.
So this isn't a weekly stand-up. I love this because it keeps it, I think it was, yeah, Yolanda commented, we do this at once a quarter. I could see how doing it once a week and putting the rep up on stage, right, that closed the deal and allowing Q&A and really having them dissect where they won, why they won, et cetera. That gives you a lot of really tangible, actionable pieces. Anthony, Ryan, anything to add to this around, these internal like win reports or things that as a sales leader or an enablement leader that you could do to facilitate conversations around that type of thing?
I just put a note in there that what you just heard, you should execute right away after this. Like, why did the client get rid of the incumbent? I want to know that. If that's not in your CRM, you're missing information that could be helpful for you in the future. I think anything that's competitive knowledge should go into your CRM right away. And I think that you should start stacking up as much insight as you can about how other people win. If somebody beats you and it's because they did something different or they had a different solution that was, let's say, sexy to the person that was looking at it, I need to know those things because our job is, especially in sales leadership, our job is to make sure our team wins. So if you don't have this information, I think you're probably losing deals you could probably win if you just had more information. And I know if you're a salesperson here, you think it's Big Brother. It's not. And I know you don't like admin. I'm allergic to admin. If I have to even fill out one form, I'm going to have hives. So I'm not good at that myself, but I am going to put anything that's useful into my CRM because that's where it belongs.
Yeah, I would just say too, like sometimes we feel a certain thing is occurring, a competitor's popping up, that they're displacing us or saying certain things. But I think tools like conversation intelligence platforms can also play a big part into that. We can actually go and analyze that. A lot of those integrate back into CRMs nowadays. I know an example for me is I had the opportunity to help scale out our UK team for a while at ZoomInfo as we were expanding international. And there was a certain competitor that kept on coming up in every conversation that I felt like I had an opportunity with. And what we were able to do at a leadership level is go analyze all of the calls that our European team has been having. How frequently is this coming up? Is this increasing month over month, decreasing month over month? What is the biggest challenge that we're facing when we hear this competitor? How do we go and fix that, right? And so I think, to Anthony's point, it needs to be documented. There needs to be a succinct place like a CRM to have that data, because from that you can then actionize those plays and make those adjustments. Otherwise, it's he said, she said, and you might make the wrong choice in terms of how you pivot.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I love about, if you're using Chorus, let's say, is that you can automatically feed that competitor intelligence right into the CRM and attach it to the deal. Anthony, Mark actually had a question for you around how to get competitive information from a client to know why we won or why our competitors lost. Is this something you kind of do during the deal? Is it something you do afterwards when you're onboarding a client? Is it something different altogether? Like, where would you get that really rich information that sometimes doesn't come up during a typical sales cycle?
I ask. I ask, like, what were you not getting? I'm not going to say, I never say anything bad about a competitor. I never do. A lot of people that read Ether Lunch early when it came out, they were unhappy that I wasn't going to trash my competitors. But there's a way better way to do that. The way to do that is to just say, they're really good people. We know them. We see each other at conferences. The only thing that we are ever going to argue about is the model, and we think their model's not good, and we love ours because it does better work than theirs. But other than that, we're all friends. I don't need to say anything negative about them, because all that does is make my status as a salesperson drop, and I'm not ever going to do that. I want your status to stay up. I'm above this, so I can do that. And if you want to know how to do this, you have to look at something that's there's a better way to do it, which is called triangulation. And that one will just get rid of all your competitors in one conversation. I ask why the person before us failed, because I need to know how not to fail them the same way that they were just uh, by the person that they just left. So that's how this goes. I'm going to ask whatever I want. A lot of people, if you have good rapport and you're actually giving them insights and you're in a good conversation, they'll share a lot of stuff with you that you might not think that they will, but they will, because they're trying to get you to help them and get the results that they need. So you can do that.
Yep.
Simply asking, I think is is big. It doesn't
Go
like we don't
figure.
get any more complicated than that. Just ask, especially in a first call, it's really relevant too. If someone is reaching out to you because they are looking to move away, I mean, simply asking why is really big, and in making sure they document that. So we've talked about the approach, this competitive intelligence piece of like, hey, let's make sure that we know and that we're tracking what competitors are coming up. What I want to talk about next is, Ryan, you guys spend a lot of time at ZoomInfo. If you could walk us through the process, what are you giving to the rep? What is the deliverable that they have around how they sit, how ZoomInfo sits against the competition, and like how much time do you guys spend building those battle cards, so to speak?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different resources available to us. Similar to Ralph, we have a weekly stand up with all of our sales reps talking through what we're seeing in the market, challenges that have popped up. Things change every single day right now in terms of what's going on with competitors and how software solutions are performing. So every week we'll sit down, talk about that, walk through different talk tracks, listen to specific snippets on calls of where someone delivered something really well. So again, trying to enable the team as a whole. We actually have a compete Slack channel where if we hear something in a deal, we'll go pass it off into the Slack channel and we can go quickly find and access a lot of that content. And then oftentimes, we use sales engagement tools. So we'll create templates of like, hey, this is a really good template for this specific use case. Here's, a whole Rolodex of when we're going up against this competitor, you can use these templates. When you're going up against this competitor, you can use those templates. So we try to, make it as process driven as possible and really accessible to our team because again, competitors pop up left and right in every single one of our deals, whether we know it or not. And so we're just trying to protect the deal as much as we can.
Love it. Something that's like super simple, adding a competitor Slack channel or Teams channel if you're using Teams. Anything that comes up for a rep, just like training everyone, like anything you hear from a competitor or about a competitor, dropping it into that channel. Okay, I want to shift gears now around like gaining access and how to think about prospecting. Anthony, you talk about something a lot called an executive briefing.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that process? Because my guess is that you're not a fan of competitor takedown campaigns, would be my guess.
No, I think I have a better way to do this. So
Yeah.
every client has missing information. They all do. So I had a conversation with a rep about a month ago, and I asked him how many meetings did he have that week. He had 20 meetings. Now it's more transactional than some of the stuff that we do, but 20 meetings is a lot of meetings. So I asked him the follow-up question, how many weeks do you do 20? He said all of them. So that's his goal, 20 meetings every single week. Now it's short and it's easy to buy. And then I said, how often does a buyer buy from you? He said, probably every 7 years, somewhere around that. So he's having 1,000 experiences of a buyer's journey in selling something, and the buyer buys every 7 years. They don't know anything. Everything has changed over 7 years. Actually, things have changed over the last year, right? And it seems like it's going faster. So what I would do is I start with an executive briefing, and the executive briefing is built on this idea of answer the why change at the very first minute that you sit down and talk to somebody. So I don't do any rapport building except for business rapport building. So I'm going to talk about their business. I'm going to talk about the trends, what's going to cause them to have problems, what they should do, how they should think about these things. And what happens is I'm looking at data with them, and they're leaning in and trying to understand these trends that I'm giving them. And then at some point, I just ask a very simple question, what's showing up in your world? And they're like, 2 of those are already problems for us. And I already know what their problems are too. And I hope that you always know what your client's problems are without having to ask, because it does lower your status. Like if you don't know what kind of problems we have, well, why am I spending time with you? So I do this executive briefing. Most of the time, they ask for a copy of it, and I always give it to them. I'm giving them the data. And I even give it to people who are not decision makers because they start sharing it up, and that helps me make a better case and starts the idea about consensus. I am an insight-based salesperson. I have been since 2001, when I realized that my clients had no idea what was going on in labor markets. I would have expected them that to have already had all the knowledge I had. They had none of it. And then they just decided, we're going to let you tell us what we need to know. And after that, that was the end of the relationship. Like forever, we're together because I was taking care of them. I would tell you, if you worry about solutions, don't worry about solutions. They're going to buy something from you if you do good work and you create value in that sales conversation. If you get that much right, don't worry so much about your solutions.
Can you share an example of what an insight is? I think defining insight and value is important because I don't know, I feel like the word value gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And the stuff that you're talking about, can you give an example just so everyone can kind of hear what that what is that? What are those insights? What would an executive find valuable in a first meeting?
I was rather young when I figured this out, but I'll give you the shortest version of this. My client had two beliefs that I could not erase from him. I just couldn't get out of the way. So he believed that labor is abundant and labor is cheap. And it was until it wasn't. And so I had to show him all the data. And I'm talking Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics. I used about 100 slides. And at the end of that briefing, he said, that was a really good briefing. And then he said, can I have a copy of your slide deck? And I said, why do you need my slide deck? And he said, I'm going to be talking to our senior leaders, and it'll be helpful for me to have that. And then he said, take the logo off before you give me the slide deck. And I'm like, the last time somebody sold my homework, I was like in third grade. And now I got this man who's in his 60s who stole my insight deck. 2 hours later, he called and gave me $2 million to raise the pay rates. And after that, I thought, I'll never have to do that again. And then after that, I did it all the time. And anytime I showed up and shared data with people, it changed the whole relationship. And you don't have to have a slide deck, but you do have to have a set. So something, Jason, would be like unemployment is at 3.2. 5% means everybody's got a job. So I would have stacks of those because I'm trying to get a narrative on the why change. So that's why I do this. That's why we teach people to do this. It's because it changed the relationships. And now I'm up here and I'm what we call being one up, which means I know things that they don't know. And if I can transfer that to them, then they will no longer have information disparity. They're going to know how to make a decision because I'm teaching them how to make the best decision for their business through insights in the conversation.
This is so powerful. The way that I've seen this done in practical application too is through customer stories. So if you have a few customers that are doing something, accomplishing a really great result, being able to say something like, this is how, Zoom and Gong and ZoomInfo or whoever is accomplishing XYZ, that can also be layered in as an insight. But I think where Anthony's going for everyone else, I would think about like, what are the things that you can share and educate your buyer on? If you sell something that's e-commerce related, like what can you tell them about the load speed on their website and how it's actually costing them millions of dollars because it takes twice as long to load as average? How can you share something around, I work with another customer that has a solution for contact centers. And the funny, like the irony with contact centers is they don't want people calling into the contact center because it costs money. They want people to self-serve through chat and FAQ. How could you share with them something that is going on with their experience that is driving people to pick up the phone because they can't find their answers? Like just stuff like it doesn't have to be crazy complicated. But I think the point here, correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, is that you need to have something that you can show and teach the buyer.
When we say creating value, what we're saying is educating the client, not on your solution, but on the decision that they have to make. And that's how you should think about this.
Love it.
We left the era of
Yeah.
solution and we're now in the era of decision making because there's so much uncertainty. Buyers want to spend more time with you and they want to make sure that they're going to be confident that they do the good work and that they get the results that they want.
It's that buyer.
I'm just sitting here learning. I'm sitting here learning from Anthony. If you notice the theme of everything he's saying, It's not to sell, it's to educate, it's to teach, it's to share insights that you're learning from a lot of the heavy lifting you've done in studying that customer and that customer's industry and the trends and issues and problems that that customer's probably facing. And he didn't ask me to do this, but I'm a big fan of his book, Eat Their Lunch. I have it right here on my desk. And in the book, he talks about 4 levels of creating value. And the way I liken it is to a building, an office building. Level 1 is when you're talking about just the product. Then you go up a floor and you're on level 2, you're talking about your service. But then as you get higher up towards the executive leadership team, level 3, you're starting to talk about business results for them. And on level 4, you're talking about insights that make you look like a strategic partner of theirs. And when you understand those levels and really what floor you're on in the office building in your conversation, you could differentiate yourself big time against your competition.
Ryan, you
Rather
guys,
easy to do if you do it the way you just described it.
yeah, and Ryan, you guys do this at ZoomInfo. I've had reps come on and sales leaders come on and talk about, like, with um, intent data. It's like you could talk about intent data in a email, or you could send them a screenshot and say, did you know that hundreds of people are looking for services like yours in your specific like city right now? Like,
Yeah.
that's like really great insight. And it's like, not like the email was not about intent data. It was, how are you thinking about the people that are looking for your stuff that are never coming across your website?
Agreed. I think one of the ways that I like to think about it is FOMO, right? Everyone has it to some degree, but the fear of missing out. It doesn't necessarily need to be the fear of missing out on a specific product or feature, but missing out on revenue gains, efficiency gains, missing out on what your competitors are doing to really level up their go-to-market process. So for me, one of the ways that I think about it is like, where is their fear in their business of them missing out on something, and how can I align to that fear and help show, where our product or solution could help fill the gap.
Absolutely. So we've talked prospecting a bit. Let's talk about, hey, when we're in a competitive deal and we're in that deal cycle, that sales cycle, how do we really displace competitors during this process? Ralph, you have a framework. You get a couple different frameworks, but can you walk us through? There's a framework that you use with your reps to help them kind of navigate some of these conversations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. The one that we default to is the acronym CBD, and it's complement, box, differentiate. So we talked a little bit about it in this discussion, that we're always complementing our competitors. This is a very small world. We know people at our competitors. Sometimes we have customers or former customers that go to our competitors, not as customers, but as employees. So we're always mindful of, these are organizations composed of people and people that we know. So we compliment our competitors on what we know they're really good at. And then we put them on a box or on a shelf. And we could say, look, they're really good at doing they address a large audience and they do it really well. And so we've already boxed them that they do this well. And then we differentiate through specificity. We start to get a little more niche. While they are very good at addressing a broad audience, we address a very narrow audience, specifically people in your role and in your business function. And this is specifically how we become a strategic partner of you and your business function in general. And we get really, really narrow. And that's how we tend to differentiate. You showed that map of just the smattering of all the different products and services that are out there. We try to aim small and hit small if we can, by being very niche and differentiating that way. And it's very effective.
And this, I would assume, is a great strategy for when you're taking on a competitor or an incumbent that is like the huge solution that touches a lot of different areas of the business. And you're coming in and saying, we can do this part. We might be a smaller company and newer to the game, but we can do this small part of this process way better than
Correct.
a sort of general. Yeah.
That's right. And, I hear, we were talking about this as well earlier in this conversation. I've got stories as well where I too will take a cold call, and more often than not, they cannot answer my first question, which is, can you tell me what we do? So we have to get very specific with what it is they do and who it is they compete with and what prospects they are pursuing, et cetera, so that we can get that attention that we need in order to differentiate against our competitors.
Anthony, Ryan, what would you guys add in terms of ways that we can navigate the competitive conversation during a sales cycle?
Ryan, you can go first.
I think for me, I mean, one of the core beliefs that I have is team selling. And when I say team selling, I'm not thinking just bringing on your manager or your director, but bringing on a really strong solutions consultant, bringing on your executive team if they're available, bringing on a customer referral that had the exact same problem and had the exact same solution and pivoted over to you and what the outcomes of that were. So one of the things outside of what Ralph already described, which is being really pinpoint and precise on where you can, help them, I think is team selling. I think people like to feel like they're making the right decision. They like to hear other voices in the industry, like we've already discussed. And so for me, when I bring on a really strong team and I enable them ahead of time saying, hey, here's the problem that they're facing, here's the incumbent and the solution, here's where I think we can drive incremental value, I align my team selling to that and say, hey, let's focus on this area and make them feel like they've never seen anything like this. And so for me, I think just bringing in the right resources and making the customer feel like they're getting that white glove service, that we're going to help them solve that problem or be more effective.
Do you have any tips for, because I think this is a really underrated thing that many reps are not thinking about. Any tips for a rep or a frontline sales leader around how they can get more buy-in from their executives to participate in deals? Because anytime, if you're selling a cybersecurity solution, you can get your CISO involved in a big deal to meet with their CISO. I mean, like, stuff like that makes a huge difference in the deal. Any advice for people that want to implement more of a strategy like this?
I think it's hard, right? Like I've been very fortunate at ZoomInfo that our executive leadership team will do whatever we need. They'll make videos, they'll go on LinkedIn, they will literally call the prospect for me if I really ask them to. So I think the first thing is just ask. I think a lot of these leaders have gone through the sales motion or they understand the problems that we face day to day. So ask them for the help and explain why. I think the other thing too is like showing those results. I think for me, what I really enjoy is coming in, helping a seller do something and get better. I'd learn a new talk track, but then being able to go watch them do it on their own 15 more times after that and see the benefits of that. So I think, asking is a big one, but then also just showing that, hey, this isn't something where I'm going to ask for your help on every single deal, but strategically where I need you, this can help us move the needle. And here's how I'm implementing this on my own, or the things I've learned from these calls and how I take that forward. Those are the things I appreciate as a leader when I'm working with my team and team selling across the board.
If you're not doing this, the challenge that you might have is that if you show up and you've got leaders with you and they're going to be part of this conversation, it means we care more than somebody that didn't bring those people. And it looks really bad when you have one person sitting there because they didn't bring somebody. And especially in big deals, I think you should show up because it means I'm going to give you what you want because I'm the leader and I can actually say yes to these things. I think it's a mistake not to bring the rest of your team as much as you can. I do have one thing to say. I have one client that if there were four legs underneath one side of the table, there was 18 on the other side because 9 people showed up. And then it's like, you probably don't need 9 people. You could probably do it with 3 or 4, but something like that. Everybody was afraid that they were going to lose something if they weren't there. So you do need to bring people if you want to make it look like you're all in on that particular client.
One thing I would add to both Ryan and Anthony is where I've seen this really successful is when you introduce leadership at the beginning of the sales cycle and at the end of the sales cycle. And especially with a marquee prospect, and this is a client you really want to partner with. The executives will listen to you and will absolutely get involved. And it also goes back to what Anthony was talking about earlier with respect to writing up an executive briefing. Tell them the narrative, maybe use a framework like, well, what is the situation? What is the challenge? why do they need to change right now? And then what action are we going to take, or what's the answer, which is SCQA. So if you're keeping little models and acronyms like that in your mental map, you're going to be able to articulate the problem pretty easily to executive leadership.
Love it. All right, you guys, we're going to start the one-on-one portion of this. So Anthony and I are going to continue kind of one-on-one and dig a little deeper. Ralph, Ryan, good to have you too. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks
for the time.
everybody.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. So I have a couple of ideas of where we could dig in, Anthony, but I'd love to hear from you guys either in the chat or in the Q&A. What are some specific questions that you have about your situation that you think would be good for us to answer? Drop those into the Q&A or just drop it into the chat and we'll take a look. The area I want to dig into, Anthony, with you that I love is this idea of challenging the model, like selling your model versus selling your features. And again, I kind of think of it like the features and the functions is down here where individual contributors and managers live. And the model is where the executives eat, sleep, and breathe, and that sort of stuff. Can you tell us a little bit more about this idea of like the model and selling that versus the features and the functions?
I was probably 18 years old when I started selling big clients, enterprise, like the Limited, Victoria's Secret, DHL, people like that. And everybody, the first question they would ask us is, tell us about your model. I have no idea what the model is. I have no clue what they're even talking about. And over time, I started to recognize that everybody's got a model and they think their model is the right model. And it is for them and their opinions. So this idea that I'm talking about that Jason just introduced is called triangulation strategy. And what that means is I'm going to leave the playing field and I'm going to go up above all of my competitors and elevate myself as the person who is the expert on these models. So I'm gonna try to tell you how to do this. So you're gonna have to take notes and you might want to have to watch this a second time. The first thing that you have to do is you have to determine, like maybe you have 4 different models that are being used in your industry. So the first thing is there's always a low price person, a company that does it. They just do it. They have a very low price. You probably can't ever beat them. And they're good at what they do, but they're not going to get you really good strategic outcomes. But transactional, they're great. So here's what you have to do. Now you have to write this down because if you get it backwards, it goes wrong. So the first thing you do is you compliment them, just like you just heard. So you say something, they're the best at the low end of this model. But you're probably going to need more customer service. You're probably not going to get everything that you need on time, and they'll work really hard, but there will be times where you're going to have people standing out on a construction site with nothing there for them to do because your stuff didn't show up. So that's the first thing. So say something nice first. So let's say this, we're going to sing their praises and then we're going to confess their sins. So each model has a sin. So then from there, we're going to go to, like, think of somebody like Granger, like scaled up, low price, right? They're very good. They almost always have everything that you need, but sometimes you're going to have to wait a couple weeks because of their shipments, something like that. Then the third is most of us. That's good enough. So you say something like, they're really good at executing at this sort of thing, but this other thing is really not their thing. So they're not as good at this on this, but they're still a really good model. And then the last one is you. So now I have to tell you this, if you have to get this right, so take notes. At this time, you say what's negative about your model because you're going to end on the good part of your model. So you say something like, Jason, we're probably going to be 12% more than anybody that you've looked at so far. But for that 12% that you give me, I'm going to make sure that you don't have any other concessions. So that's what you do. This is called triangulation strategy. And what I'm trying to do is get rid of all of the other models other than mine all at the same time. And if you want to create value and you try this with a client, you will find out that they're very interested in this conversation. It's really important to them and they want to understand those models so that they can make the decision. But I'm going to say at the end, they're probably going to choose you because you explained this. You can do this even with the low price. And you could say, for what you're thinking about, you don't need to spend any more than you're going to spend with us. So there's a whole bunch of ways to do this, but this is what you should try to do, is be somebody that is a subject matter expert that understands the models, and that elevates you. So I'm always concerned about the status of the salesperson. So if your status is high, it's easy for you to do these things. If your status is low, it's difficult. So this is where B2B sales is now and where it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going in this direction because buyers are having a tough time. I think it was your third bullet point. They are remorseful on the decisions that they made because they didn't get the information that they needed to make a good decision. So I would tell you, don't think so much about solution. Think about how to enable that decision for that person to make sure that they're certain and they've got confidence to make the decision.
Yeah. So I'm thinking in software, a lot of folks here on this call, like the model could be, like some sort of self-service versus something that is more white glove, where it's like you're going to have to go in there and purchase the things that you need, and you can do it on demand, but it doesn't come without any of the hand holding that you're likely going to need for XYZ reasons. Is there any other insight that you have on like the model, like how to determine models? Is it fairly straightforward oftentimes in cases, or do you have to really think about, I mean, this is really something the sales leadership, the executive team should be thinking about, the competitive
Absolutely.
models, and
Yeah,
teaching.
absolutely. And you don't have to do so much work. I mean, if you look at your competitors, they're going to be in a number of buckets. Put them in those buckets and say, this is what's good. This is what's wrong with that model. And that will get you most of the way there.
Yeah, love it. Camilla has a great question. In outbound, when the prospect is not in market to change a solution, let's say you've been able to pinpoint the why now. Now, how can you overcome status quo regarding contract termination clauses with your current solution? So, and I guess a more broad question would be, you were able to secure a meeting via outbound, but they're mid-contract with another company. Is there anything that you can do maybe to help overcome status quo? And if not, how would you think about a deal like that?
My pitch goes something like this, Jason. It's Anthony Iannarino. I'm calling you from B2B Sales Coach and Consultancy, and I'm asking you today for a 25-minute executive briefing. I'm going to make sure that your team gets to see this, and even if there's not a next step for us, you're going to know what these trends are, and I'm going to make sure that you understand what the implications are. What do you look like Thursday? And I did that for years and years and years, and it still works. If you're not trading something of value for that meeting, if there's not something that's interesting or something that's attractive to them, like knowing something that they didn't know, then it's very, very difficult. So you're just calling and you're saying, I want to have a meeting with you. Okay, so that means you're going to pitch me. You're going to try to get rid of my incumbent, and I'm not ready to do that. But if I'm going to show you an executive briefing and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the future, it's a lot easier for people to say yes. And it turns out, and so there's only one objection to a meeting, and it is, I think you're going to waste my time. That's the only one. Now they'll say it, we're happy with our incumbent supplier. And then you have a meeting with them, 15 minutes, and like, yeah, they're not doing very well. They will say that to get rid of you, but once you're talking to them, they start telling you all the problems that they have. But if you don't offer them something that's insightful, that's something that could, and I said, look, I'll give them this and I'll walk away, but I imagine I'm going to have to walk back in later after they find out that nobody else does anything like what we're doing. And
Yeah.
and that's what you should be thinking about. How do I have a better sales conversation than any of my competitors? Everybody's got a good solution. Everybody works for a good company. Everybody's trying to do good work. But the person that can help the sales or the client the most, that's the one that's probably going to win. It's the one that they trust. So I want to say something about this. You have to be the safest person to buy from. You have to be the safest person. And if you don't have insights and you can't tell them how to make these decisions and you can't tell them about the models, then it's very difficult for you to do this. But if you can do those things, you just stick out. Like you don't look or sound like anybody else. It makes it very, very easy. I will tell you the teams that I have in staffing, which I own part of one, but the other one I don't own anything. But our win rates are 85%.
Wow.
You don't have to get any better than that.
Yeah.
They're all mature. They've been in the industry for a long time. Very easy.
Yeah. Love it. Great question. Okay. I thought this was a really interesting one as well. Anna asked, my biggest client uses me and my primary competitor, though the competitor charges more for the same service. How do I win the client to use us exclusively? So how do you think about situations like this where you and your competitor maybe sell an array of solutions and your customer is using part of your stuff, part of theirs? And I have a feeling the answer is going to be fairly similar. How do you even broach the subject of meeting to talk about the fact that, hey, we do those things too, and let's do those things with us, versus splitting it across the competitor? How do you think about approaching that conversation?
I've done it so many times in staffing. Like sometimes you have 3 people all working in the same company, and you do have to do something to get rid of them. But you can't do anything negative about this. So you have to do something positive about this. What you should probably think about is why you have a contract right now. So that's it. So you've got that. So that means you have access. If you have access, then what I'm going to tell you that I know works because I've done it, it's your ability to continue to give them new value. If you don't have new value, it's very hard to displace them. But if you have new value, so you go out, you get that client, you start executing, everything's going fine, and you think everything's going fine. No, your competitors may be trying to create new value to get rid of you. So you should always have a plan that once you start working with them, what are we going to do with them next? And then what are we going to do with them after that? And if you want to do this the right way, when you have your first meeting, have a roadmap of these are the things that we should do right now. After you get this in place, then we can do this. That will get you even further. And then after this, we can get you here. You should start that conversation at the very beginning of the first meeting. You should start right there that we have this plan to take you from here to there. I don't think that you can do anything about the competitors. They will probably not know to do new value all the time, and that would give you an advantage right away. So I learned very quickly, if you want to keep that client, you want to retain them and you want to grow them, then you keep giving them new value. Once you run out of new value, then you got problems. But if you do an executive briefing and you do that all the time and you're constantly giving them insights and telling them what you're learning, very, very easy for you to dominate that client.
Yeah, because part of competitive displacement is making sure that you don't get displaced and not, sitting on your laurels, or however the saying goes. I think a way to action this for those of you on the call, if you manage big accounts at your company, you probably do some sort of quarterly business review with the client. Are you just showing up and talking about how awesome the tool or service did to get them a result? Or are you also coupling that with, hey, here's what's going on in the marketplace in the industry right now. Here's what you need to prepare for over the next 6 to 12 months, so that you're setting up one, like that upsell or that cross sell, but you're also adding that value in those conversations. Because I think one of the things that we condition our customers to do sometimes is the executives, they stop taking those quarterly business reviews because it's all like upsell talk. here's where you're getting value from our solution. By the way, we want to sell you some more stuff, and there's no strategic value at all around what their competitors are doing, what they should be looking out for, etc. Cool. We got one more question, and then we got to bounce. Okay, this is a really good question. The person didn't put their name, but let's say that your org drinks the Kool-Aid and all the internal training is about how we're the best. Internally, how do you start shifting the tide at scale so that reps actually get all the information and can capitalize on it? For example, leveraging loss reports, trend industry awareness, et cetera. I think another way I might ask that question is, if you start to build some of this stuff at the leadership level, and maybe it's not an org-wide thing that they do really well, how do you think about like the reinforcement of this stuff, like getting the reps to actually use the stuff that you're creating? How do you think about that part?
I'm going to tell you what my experience is. If I give somebody the training to do an executive briefing and they do it and they sit down and they realize, like I'll give you a guy named Jeff. He didn't want to do it. He did it. He did it at lunch with a client. And the client said, you identified all of our problems and the strategies that we should do. And he sent me a note and said, this is my proudest moment as a salesperson. And now he only does the executive briefing. It's probably 10 minutes for him. It's probably 4 trends that he'll go through. And we have a whole bunch of people that do it this way. It does change the relationship at the very beginning of this. And I think it's important to do something like that. And I think also you should probably, if you don't have a good, rigorous idea about how to take care of these things that we were talking about with the CRM, I would tell you it's very, very powerful, and it's worth the time to put it in to a CRM, because that's where everything belongs. And later on, you're going to have a lot more knowledge of your competitors and how to beat them.
Yeah, this is a sales ops thing that for you sales leaders on here, this is something to work with your operations team on. I'm going to drop a couple links into the chat. Anthony, where can people go to check you out, your stuff?
thesalesblog.com or LinkedIn.
Go check out this stuff. There's a link right there on how to run executive briefings, and then go check out Anthony's blog. He's got a bunch of good books and stuff that he's come out with as well. One of them being Eat Your Lunch, and I think Elite Sales Strategies probably talks a lot about, those are the 2 books that are probably best for the topic today, but make sure to go check them out. Anthony, as always, good jamming with you. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, he says jamming because he wants to go right back to Van Halen.
That's
If you
right.
don't know that, now you know.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. We'll see ya. Thanks for spending time with us.